This isn't the Wild West you saw in movies. This is the version they didn't want you to know. You're not strutting into town with spurred boots and a 6-shooter polished to a shine. No, you're limping, dust blind, your tongue sandpapered dry, and there's a faint stench of something rotting behind that saloon. Maybe it's a horse, maybe it's not. The sun is a malicious overseer, and the streets are a mosaic of manure and blood spatters that no one's bothered to scrub. This is the American frontier in the mid to late 1800s, and if you think you're the main character here, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from tonight? What city? What time? Let's map this midnight posse together. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You hear his name long before you see him. Wyatt Earp. The syllables arrive like a gust of dry wind through a cracked window, short, sharp, impossible to ignore. But in 1848, when he's born in a sleepy corner of Illinois, the name means nothing, just another child in a nation tearing at its own seams, preparing for war, expansion, and the great American hallucination of destiny. You trudge behind his father, Nicholas Earp, a Civil War veteran with a wandering compass and more principles than paychecks. He drags the family across the Midwest like a man looking for something he lost in a dream. You bump across Iowa, then California, then back to the corn-choked flatlands of Missouri. Every house they build gets left behind. You learn early that permanence is a myth out here, and a name is only as strong as the fist behind it. Wyatt isn't the golden boy just yet. He's awkward, withdrawn, bookish, even, but he learns two things quickly: how to shoot, and how to vanish. Both come in handy later, though not always in the ways you'd expect. The young Earp idolizes his older brothers, James, Virgil, and Newton, who all wear military uniforms like armor. Meanwhile, he dreams of going west, chasing buffalo, and maybe shooting just enough men to be remembered but not enough to be lynched. By 1864, you're bouncing in a wagon again, this time toward San Bernardino, California. Wyatt's just a teenager, wrestling boredom and puberty under the hot sun. Historians still argue whether this era gave him his distaste for farming or just revealed he was no good at it. Either way, he's about as suited to agriculture as a rattlesnake is to crocheting. But the journey west leaves an imprint. You can still smell the sagebrush on him years later, in saloons and jails and mining camps. He sees the lawlessness blooming ahead of the railroads like a fungus, towns springing up overnight, full of gamblers, drifters, brothel queens, and thieves dressed like bankers. The Civil War ends, the frontier expands, and suddenly every restless man in America wants to be either a sheriff or a legend, or maybe both. Wyatt, by 17, is trying to be something between. He returns to Missouri and takes a job as a teamster, hauling freight, sleeping in dirt, and learning how to survive the kind of loneliness that settles behind your eyes and stays there. Somewhere along the way, he tries working for the Union Pacific Railroad, swinging a hammer on the transcontinental tracks. It's loud, backbreaking, and anonymous, but it teaches him rhythm. Later, when you watch him draw his revolver in one smooth motion, remember, he learned that timing on steel and wood long before he ever enforced a law. Now, a quirky detail for your dusty mental scrapbook. For a short while, young Wyatt probably traveled with buffalo hunters and might have rubbed shoulders with a fellow named William Frederick Cody, later known as Buffalo Bill. There's no photo, no diary, no signature proof, just whispers in the dusty pages of half-remembered journals. But imagine those campfires. One day you'll see these names etched into American mythology. For now, they're just boys with dirty boots and stories too wild to be entirely false. Back in Missouri, Wyatt tries settling down. It doesn't go well. At age 22, he marries a woman named Guerrilla Sutherland. She's young, devout, and, by most accounts, sweet-natured. They get a little house near Lamar. He becomes constable. Things look almost normal. Then guerrilla dies. Typhoid, they think, or maybe childbirth. No one's sure. All that's left is a grave and a Wyatt who's suddenly unmoored. Drifting, and more dangerous in spirit than he ever was with a gun. Some folks say that's when the real Wyatt Earp was born, not the husband. Not the lawman, but the hollow-eyed creature who wandered across Kansas with a .44 on his hip and an unspoken grudge against the entire concept of permanence. Grief doesn't sharpen him, it sandpapers him down. In the following years, he'll be arrested for horse theft. He'll escape jail. He'll bounce from Arkansas to Peoria, sometimes working brothel doors as a bouncer, sometimes drinking his weight in regret. During one bizarre winter in Illinois, he's even listed in a city directory as a pimp, though no one knows if that's a job title or just local shade. Here's where the historians break into arguments at the campfire. Did Wyatt fall into crime out of desperation? Or was he always morally flexible, just looking for the right price? Some call this his lost years. Others say this was the most honest version of him, unpolished, unsupervised, and uninterested in being a hero. But you're not walking away. Not yet. Because even in the saloon haze and scandal sheets, you feel something forming, an instinct. Maybe. Wyatt learns where the edge is. How close he can get without bleeding. He watches men die over spilled drinks and unpaid cards. He notices which judges can be bribed and which can't. And deep inside that tall, quiet shell, something harder than grief is starting to calcify. He heads west again, because where else would a man like this go? Not to church, not to the arms of another sweetheart, but toward places where the law is just a rumor and the fastest man writes the rules. And next time he puts on a badge, the world's going to notice. You don't ease into the 1870s, you stumble, face first, into a mudhole outside Fort Gibson, Oklahoma territory. It's damp, mosquito-infested, and so lawless even the marshals look over their shoulders. Wyatt Earp is somewhere nearby, just 23 years old, boots caked in dried horse dung, wanted for stealing a horseback in Arkansas. Yes, that's right, the man who'll become the poster child for law and order starts his reputation as a fugitive on the run. You follow his trail through Indian territory, breathing in the wet rot of creek beds and listening for the buzz of flies over shallow graves. He escapes jail with nothing but a file, a bit of rope, and either dumb luck or a bribed guard. Historians still argue about the exact escape route. He doesn't talk about this period much. And why would he? It's not the kind of thing that goes on your resume when you apply for town marshal. But let's rewind for a second. It's easy to forget that the Earp family wasn't just Wyatt. He had 4 full brothers and several half-siblings. Virgil, James, Newton, all of them orbiting the American frontier like half-tamed comets. They came from military stock, steeped in speeches about justice and self-reliance. But the war left scars, on the land and in the men. You tag along as Wyatt drifts back toward family in Kansas. Dodge City hasn't quite exploded yet, but towns like Ellsworth and Newton are boiling over with trouble. Cattle drives end here, and cowboys flush with pay and whiskey are itching to turn their money into noise. The saloons never close, the sheriffs don't sleep, and a new breed of man is taking shape, one who can shoot, reason, bluff, and break noses in equal measure. Wyatt tries a little bit of everything. Freight hauling, bouncer work, some gambling, some, brothel adjacent, security. It's messy. His moral compass doesn't always point north. But you notice something odd, wherever he lands. He slowly gravitates toward the law, or at least adjacent to it. He doesn't chase trouble, he absorbs it, stares it down, waits until it blinks. Quirky detail. For a brief time, Wyatt might have worked as a buffalo hunter's guide. And yes, there's a faint chance he crossed paths with Bat Masterson and Wild Bill Hickok before any of them were famous. They weren't legends yet, just tired men with good aim and worse tempers. But imagine the poker games. By 1874, Wyatt drifts into Wichita. It's one of the fastest growing towns in the state, thanks to the railroads. It's also a place where disputes are often settled by who draws first. Not who's right. You feel it in the air, bristling tension in the way men walk. Hand always near holster, and yet here comes Wyatt, 6 feet tall, quiet, unassuming, and slowly slipping into a badge. He doesn't get hired for being fast. He gets hired because he's calm, still, stone-faced while other men yell. He doesn't talk much, but when he does, he sounds like he already knows how this will end. It rattles people. Still, his first days as a deputy constable aren't glamorous. You're arresting drunk ranch hands, hauling gamblers out of alley brawls, and occasionally tossing a toothless man into the street for unpaid debts. Not exactly legend-making stuff, but it builds something, his reputation as a man who doesn't flinch. And more importantly, a man who shows up. Now, here's where it gets murky. Wyatt's time in Wichita ends badly. He scuffles with a political opponent of the town marshal during a re-election season. And just like that, he's out. Fired. Politics, not crime, does him in. It's a reminder. In the West, the law isn't always about justice. Sometimes it's just about who has more friends at the bar. So what do you do when you've tasted power but lost it in a barroom scuffle? You pack up, again, and head toward Dodge City. But before we get there, let's pause for a moment with a fringe tidbit. Some legends claim Wyatt once rode shotgun for Wells Fargo stagecoaches during these years, guarding gold shipments with nothing but a shotgun and a steady nerve. There's little concrete proof, but the stories cling to him like cigar smoke. Whether they're true or not almost doesn't matter. Wyatt learns that silence lets myths do the talking. Back in Kansas, the frontier is shifting. More rail lines, more cattle, more saloons, and more men with short tempers and even shorter lives. In these years, Wyatt isn't just surviving, he's studying. He watches how lawmen succeed, and how they die. He notes which gamblers get away with cheating. He clocks who controls the saloons, the courts, the women, the money, and maybe most importantly, he learns when to hit back, and when to wait. You'd be forgiven for thinking he's just another drifting opportunist. And maybe he is, but underneath it, there's a cold calculus in his movements. He may not know what he wants to be, but he's very clear on what he refuses to be: poor, forgotten, and vulnerable. So he keeps moving. Kansas fades behind you like a warped oil painting, too hot, too loud, too full of unmarked graves. But Wyatt Earp is just getting started. He hasn't met Doc Holliday yet, hasn't stepped into Tombstone, hasn't fired a single famous shot. But already, he's building the foundation: resilience, nerve, and a willingness to color inside, or outside, the lines, depending on who's drawing them. Next stop, Dodge City. You might want to brace yourself. You ride into Dodge City before dawn. The sky bleeding pink over the Arkansas River. The town greets you with the stench of cattle, fresh manure, and gun oil. It's loud even at sunrise: barking dogs, drunken singing, the clatter of wagons, and when the saloons open, it only gets worse. This isn't the place to make a name. It's where names come to die. Unless, of course, you're Wyatt Earp. Dodge City in 1876 is a fever dream with a city charter. Half cowtown, half powder keg. Trail drives from Texas bring in thousands of longhorn cattle, and with them, cowboys flush with money and itching for mischief. The population balloons every summer, then shrinks with the frost. Lawmen don't keep peace here. They survive it. And now Wyatt's back, hired again as an assistant marshal. You walk a step behind him down Front Street. The buildings are low and crooked, slapped together in a hurry, like the town itself is bracing for a punch. You pass saloons with names like Long Branch and Alhambra, each promising warmth and whiskey and offering instead a stiff chair and a poker table that smells like sweat. Wyatt's job: keep order, which really means keep the blood off the floor before sunrise. He's not alone in this, though. You meet Bat Masterson, still young and unpredictable, and a host of others, some noble, most not. Wyatt stands out, not because he talks a lot, he doesn't. or dresses fancy, he doesn't. But because when trouble starts, he doesn't blink. He's the quietest man in the room, and somehow, the one everyone watches. Now here's a historical fact to file under. Really? Dodge City was known as the Queen of the Cowtowns. It boasted more saloons than churches, more prostitutes than schoolteachers, and enough vice to keep a preacher sweating through his sermon. Wyatt works in the middle of it all, balancing a badge in one hand and a deck of cards in the other. That's right, when he's not chasing drunks and breaking up knife fights. He's gambling, not because he's addicted, but because it's profitable, and because he's good at reading people. You notice he's not flashy about it. He folds often, wins quietly. He's not trying to get rich, he's trying to understand the men he might one day need to shoot. Fringe tidbit incoming: Wyatt wasn't fond of drinking. In fact, he rarely touched the stuff. Picture him, stone sober, standing in a saloon surrounded by red-eyed, trigger-happy ranch hands halfway through their second bottle. That discipline, that control, is part of what unsettles people. He's never quite in the party, even when he's standing in the middle of it. Historians still argue whether Wyatt enjoyed being a lawman or simply tolerated it. Some say he craved the authority. Others claim it was just a paycheck until he could find a better game. But in Dodge, he starts to become something more than just a peacekeeper. He becomes a presence, the kind that doesn't need a speech or a warning, just a look. You watch him drag a cowboy out of a saloon by the belt. No yelling, no threats, just a firm grip and a door that creaks on the way out. Later that night, he'll sit across from that same man at a poker table, win $5 off him, and walk home in silence. That duality defines him. Enforcer by day, gambler by night, never truly on either side of the law, but somehow always protected by it. You begin to understand why people either respected him, or desperately wanted to see him fall. One night, you follow him into a scuffle behind the Long Branch saloon. A man's waving a pistol, screaming something about a stolen watch. Before you can even blink, Wyatt's behind him, arm locked, gun hand twisted, weapon gone, no shot fired, just cold steel discipline and a lesson learned. The man whimpers. Wyatt walks away. Later, over a plate of beans and regret, you hear someone mutter, "That Earp don't scare easy," and you nod, because you've seen it now. Wyatt doesn't bark, he bites only when needed. And when he does, it's quick and clean. But the job wears on him. Every night, more drunks, more outlaws riding in with itchy fingers and something to prove. You start to notice the shadows under Wyatt's eyes, the hesitation before he steps into a crowd. This isn't heroism, it's fatigue with a badge pinned on it. You also see how the politics of Dodge chip away at him. The mayors want order, but not too much. The saloon owners want calm, but not if it scares away the gamblers. Every arrest becomes a negotiation. Every fight has witnesses with different loyalties. Wyatt's stuck in the middle, trying to hold a line that keeps moving. So what keeps him going? Maybe it's the idea of control, not over others, but over himself. In a town that changes faces every week, Wyatt keeps his expression steady. When he walks down Front Street, you follow him not because he's the toughest man alive, but because he believes he is. And in Dodge, belief is sometimes all that stands between order and chaos. Here's the joke you hear whispered in alleyways: if you shoot at Wyatt, better hit. You don't get a second chance to annoy him. You laugh, but it's only funny until it's not. The graveyards outside town are filled with men who underestimated the quiet ones. So what does Wyatt learn here? In this living hell of gunsmoke and gambling? Timing, patience, the value of saying less and watching more. He learns how to pick his fights, and how to end them. And he learns that being right doesn't always keep you alive, but being ready, that might. You leave Dodge City with sore feet, a ringing in your ears, and a growing respect for a man who never asked to be remembered, but somehow made sure he wouldn't be forgotten. Next stop, a family reunion, and the seeds of a storm named Tombstone. You drift into the next chapter with trail dust still caked in your boots. It's 1878 now. And Wyatt Earp is restless. Dodge City's given him a name. Sure. But not a fortune. Not peace. And definitely not a future. He's 30, give or take, and starting to realize he doesn't want to die for a paycheck and a handshake from the mayor. So he leaves. You walk with him as he steps out of Dodge one last time. Boots creaking on the wooden sidewalk, nodding to a few locals who owe him their lives, or at least their unbroken noses. He heads west again, but this time, he's not alone in any meaningful sense. Family is starting to circle. Virgil is out there, lawman by trade. James, older and steadier, is already settled. And Morgan, Wyatt's younger brother, is looking for something. Too, they all orbit the same dream. Land, wealth, maybe even redemption, depending on the day. But before the whole crew converges, you take a small detour. Because a certain someone is about to join the narrative who'll change Wyatt's life forever. Enter Doc Holliday. No trumpet fanfare, just a coughing fit and the clink of a whiskey glass. You first see him slouched in a saloon corner in Texas, looking like death wearing a velvet vest. He's thin as a prayer, eyes like gunmetal, and his smile, that's a weapon all its own. Doc's a dentist by training, gambler by obsession, and gunfighter by necessity. Tuberculosis has turned his lungs to paper. But don't let that fool you. He'll still shoot you before you can blink. And something about Wyatt draws him in. Historians still argue whether their friendship was based on shared principles, mutual convenience, or just the fact that no one else could stand them. But the two men bond in a way that's rare for this world, quickly. Absolutely, and without apology. You watch it happen one night in Fort Griffin. A barroom misunderstanding. A drunk Texan pulls a knife. Wyatt's not even armed. Before the man can lunge, Doc steps in, gun drawn, and grins like he's ordering dessert. You gonna do something stupid? Or just look ugly? That's the night they become a team. You don't know it yet. But the OK Corral, the Vendetta ride, the legends, they all start here. Over a spilled drink and a near murder. For now, Wyatt's still wandering. He dabbles in silver mining in New Mexico. Fails. Mostly. He drifts into Prescott, Arizona, and gambles. Wins. Then loses. Then wins again. He's got that unshakable poker face. Remember, he and Doc are occasionally together. Occasionally not. But the bond holds. In these in-between years, you learn something strange. Wyatt's not particularly loyal to the law anymore. He's deputized when it suits him. He quits when it doesn't. He's not chasing a cause. He's chasing a life that doesn't feel like a trap. He partners with saloon owners, hangs around dance halls, gambles in mining towns that rise and fall with the silver veins. He's a man in search of the next thing, even if he can't name it. Quirky tidbit time. At one point, Wyatt joins a posse to hunt down a known outlaw named Dirty Dave Rudabor. During the manhunt, they reportedly ride for days without food, chewing leaves and rainwater just to stay upright. The best part, Rudabor later escapes custody, rides north, and ends up running with Billy the Kid. Wild West, very small world. But you feel it now, building in the air like static. The brothers are regrouping. James and Virgil are already in Arizona territory. Morgan's on his way. Even Doc is sniffing around. It's 1879, and you and Wyatt roll into a place that sounds more like fiction than fact, Tombstone. Yes, it's real, a mining town named after a joke, because the prospector who found silver there was told the only thing he'd strike was his tombstone. He proved them wrong, and now the hills are full of silver, the streets are thick with mud, and every man you pass looks like he's rehearsing a final duel. You glance at Wyatt. He's not wearing a badge. Not yet. He and his brothers are just here to stake mining claims. Invest in saloons. Maybe settle down. For once. The Earps aren't here to enforce law. They're here to make money. But you know how that goes. Tombstone is a petri dish for conflict. Cowboys from the surrounding ranches come to town loaded with cash and ego. Business owners want order, but not too much. Corrupt politicians play both sides. And beneath it all simmers a cultural war: lawmen, ranchers, gamblers, immigrants, capitalists, all jammed into a town too small to contain their ambitions. Here's your mainstream historical fact. By 1880, Tombstone boasted nearly 7,000 residents, a theater, a red light district, and an underground water system, rare luxuries in frontier towns. But it also had a crime rate that would give modern cities a nervous twitch. Stagecoach robberies, cattle rustling, and shootouts were practically scheduled events. And Wyatt, he's trying to stay out of it. He's got a partner now, Josie Marcus, a fiery actress with connections to local politicians and a past that's a little too tangled to explain in one paragraph. She's with someone else when she meets Wyatt. Doesn't matter, you know how these stories go. Wyatt partners with his brothers to buy stakes in silver mines. They run saloons, they play cards, and for a while, it almost looks like they'll just be businessmen. But that's not how Tombstone works. It doesn't let men like Wyatt fade quietly into profit. Conflict is coming. You feel it in the way the cowboys eye the Earps when they walk past. In the whispers over whiskey. In the broken windows and the bribes disguised as favors. The lines are being drawn. And Wyatt, he may not wear a badge yet, but he's already on the wrong side of someone's crosshairs. So saddle up. Tombstone isn't just a town, it's a pressure cooker. And the lid's about to blow. You step back into the street and the dust stings your eyes. Tombstone's grown meaner in the last few months. Subtle things. Fewer smiles. More hands hovering near belts. And whenever the Earps walk by, especially Wyatt, conversations go quiet. You can smell it, the tension, the sweat behind men's ears, the metallic tang of silver mixed with suspicion. You're not in a boomtown anymore. You're in a powder keg. Wyatt is trying to stay out of it. He and his brothers are still investing in mines, managing saloon deals, and staying nominally friendly with the local politicians. But you can't walk 3 blocks without bumping into a man who calls himself a cowboy. And they're not just herding cattle. This particular breed of cowboy, the capital C kind, isn't a profession. It's a gang: rustlers, smugglers, stagecoach robbers, some of them barely literate and many of them armed to the teeth. They drink hard, ride harder, and don't care much for city laws. They see the Earps as something alien, dressed too sharp, too steady, too aligned with the business elite. It's not one thing that kicks off the war, it's dozens of little things. Broken deals, rigged games, stolen horses, whispered insults passed like loaded pistols. You remember Curly Bill Brocious? No, you will. He's the cowboy's unofficial ringleader. Wild eyes, twisted grin, loves whiskey almost as much as he loves chaos. One night, he stumbles drunk into the dark, sees a shadow he doesn't like, and fires. The victim, Fred White, Tombstone's town marshal, and a friend of Wyatt. You follow as Wyatt sprints toward the shot. He finds Fred bleeding, Curly Bill still holding the smoking gun. In that moment, Wyatt doesn't hesitate. He cold cocks Bill in the jaw with the barrel of his own revolver, knocking him flat. Witnesses swear Wyatt doesn't even draw, just swings like a man who's had enough. He disarms Bill and drags him to jail alone, daring the other cowboys to make a move. They don't, not because they can't, but because for a flicker of a second, Wyatt looks like he might take all of them down with him. Fred White dies, but Wyatt's name, somehow, grows. And this is the moment you realize, he's not just reacting anymore. He's being watched. Historians still argue whether Wyatt wanted the confrontation or simply didn't know how to avoid it. But either way, his actions mark him in bold ink. The cowboys begin to view him as more than an inconvenience. He's now an obstacle. And obstacles in Tombstone get buried fast. Here's your quirky tidbit for tonight's long ride. During these early Tombstone months, Wyatt is reportedly offered a job as a deputy U.S. Marshal, and turns it down. Why? Unclear. Maybe the pay was low. Maybe he smelled what was coming. Maybe he wasn't ready to wear the target just yet. Instead, Virgil Earp, older, steadier, more comfortable with duty, becomes town marshal. Wyatt serves as his backup. Unofficial but undeniable, Morgan Earp joins the fold too. You've got 3 Earp brothers walking the same streets. All carrying iron, all staring down the same problems. It's not just family anymore. It's a unit. And the cowboys, they're not exactly subtle in their growing contempt. You pass Ike Clanton in a saloon, running his mouth after 3 drinks too many. Those Earp boys think they're the law. He slurs. I say we show who runs this town. It's bravado, sure, but bravado backed by bullets. These men aren't just loud. They're dangerous. Stagecoach robberies spike. Lawmen are threatened. One day, a U.S. Marshal is gunned down in the street. No one claims responsibility. Everyone has a theory. And you're watching Tombstone tilt toward madness. The Earps aren't saints, though, far from it. Wyatt's playing both sides, working law enforcement angles while still holding private business interests in gambling halls and saloons. They're arresting cowboys by day, then shaking hands with the town elite by night. Conflict of interest, maybe, but this is the Wild West. Remember, the law bends like a horseshoe over fire. Here's the moment it crystallizes for you. A barroom scuffle. Wyatt walks in to break it up. One of the cowboys, Frank McClory, maybe Tom, says, "Why don't you try pulling that gun?" Lawman, Wyatt doesn't flinch, doesn't draw, just smiles. "Because if I do," he says, "you'll be dead before yours clears leather." Dead silence. Then boots scraping the floor as men back away. That's the Earp effect. Quiet thunder. The cowboys don't forget that smile. Every day, you feel the town fracturing. The lines aren't blurred anymore. They're drawn in dirt and blood. Cowboys versus Earps. Corruption versus control. And the people in the middle, just praying someone wins before everyone loses. Meanwhile, Doc Holliday is growing more restless. His cough worse. His temper shorter. He's loyal to Wyatt, but he's also volatile. Unpredictable. One minute he's playing poker. The next he's waving a knife at someone for breathing too loud. Wyatt defends him, over and over, to everyone who'll listen. "He's my friend," he says. "I don't care what else he is." And that, you realize, is Wyatt's fatal flaw. He stands by his people, even when it costs him everything. The town's energy thickens. Every eye is watching. Every whisper could be the spark. There are rumors of a coming fight. Not a skirmish, not a brawl, a fight, the kind they write about in pulp papers and sing about over campfires. You're not sure where, or when, but it's close. You can feel it. The wind tastes metallic. The horses are skittish, and Wyatt's hand hovers closer to his gun than it ever has before. Tombstone is a tinderbox. The match is in someone's hand. And nobody's going to blow it out in time. You wake to boots on wooden floors and a dry rattle in the wind. Tombstone doesn't sleep easy anymore. Neither do you. It's October 1881. And you can hear the tension in men's spurs. The streets are quieter, but not calmer. They've gone still, like the silence before a storm. You cross Allen Street and feel every set of eyes follow you from saloon windows and darkened doorways. No one's saying much. Everyone's carrying more iron than usual. You stick close to Wyatt now. Because whatever's coming, he's in the center of it. The cowboys have escalated. Threats are no longer whispered. They're shouted across tables and alleyways. Ike Clanton, red-faced and reckless, has been mouthing off in the saloons again, claiming the Earps are tyrants. That Tombstone belongs to the ranchers, not the businessmen and bankers Wyatt's been rubbing elbows with. He's not entirely wrong, either. You see, this isn't a simple matter of law versus outlaw. It's class tension, regional tension, even cultural tension. The Earps are aligned with the Republican commercial elite. The cowboys lean Democrat, frontier populist, rugged and anti-establishment. One side wears neckties, the other wears neckerchiefs. One sips bourbon behind polished bars, the other swigs moonshine from tin cups. Historians still argue whether this was a law and order showdown or a turf war dressed in legal language. But you're walking beside the men now. You smell their sweat. Hear the nervous clicks of revolver hammers half-cocked behind closed doors. It's more personal than politics. It's pride, ego, grudges that bleed, and the pressure's about to snap. But before we get there, one last twist. The Earps aren't even officially out for blood. Not yet. On October 25, 1881, Wyatt has a civil conversation with Ike Clanton, of all people. In a saloon, they talk gambling, cattle, even laugh a little. It's like the town is pretending things are normal. Then Ike gets drunk, real drunk. By morning, he's armed, agitated, and threatening death to the Earps, loudly, publicly. You're there as he stomps through town with his Winchester, looking for a fight. Virgil Earp arrests him without much fuss. But the fuse is lit. Wyatt's watching it burn. The cowboys gather. Frank and Tom McClory, Billy Clanton, Billy Claiborne. They're armed, pacing around Fremont Street, and sending a clear message: we're not backing down. You feel it, heavy in the air. This is the day. Now let's pause for one of those fringe details you'll never see in the movies. Wyatt's revolver during the coming showdown may not have even fired. Some reports suggest he held a nickel-plated Colt with an ivory grip, a gift from his time in Dodge. Others say he used a Smith & Wesson. Historians still argue over who shot first, who missed, who lied. In the fog of gunfire and ego, even the truth comes out looking suspicious. But that's getting ahead of things. The time is 3 p.m. October 26th. You walk behind Wyatt, Virgil, Morgan, and Doc Holliday. The four of them stride down Fremont Street, heading toward the back of the OK Corral, though the fight, ironically, will unfold in a narrow lot beside C.S. Fly's photography studio. It's hot. Dust swirls at their boots. Wyatt's coat is open. Doc coughs behind a sneer. Morgan's fingers twitch near his holster. Virgil is stone-faced, holding a shotgun under his arm. They turn the corner. The cowboys are waiting. There's a moment, no more than 3 seconds, where time freezes. You hear someone shout, "Throw up your hands." A pause, a curse, then thunder. The gunfight lasts only 30 seconds. 30. In that half-minute, around 30 shots are fired. Frank and Tom McClory fall. So does Billy Clanton. Morgan and Virgil are wounded. Wyatt stands untouched. Doc's lip is split, and he's laughing like a man who's finally found a reason to keep breathing. You're still catching your breath when the smoke clears. 3 cowboys lie dead in the dirt. Blood soaks into the dust. Nearby horses rear. Women scream. Someone's hat lies crumpled beside a spent shell casing. It's over. But it's not. Not even close. The OK Corral shootout becomes the most debated 30 seconds in Western history. Newspapers can't print fast enough. Heroes, murderers, vigilantes, defenders of peace. The headlines throw darts in every direction. You read them all, and none of them feel like what you saw. Because what you saw wasn't justice. It wasn't evil either. It was just 4 men walking into a gunfight they hoped they wouldn't have to finish, but finished anyway. You walk back with Wyatt that night. He's quiet. He knows what's coming. There will be inquests, accusations, maybe arrests. The cowboys who remain are already plotting. And now the lines aren't just drawn. They're carved. Wyatt didn't start this war, but he's in it now. And this town doesn't forgive blood in the street. So go ahead, catch your breath, but keep one hand near your holster. Because the cowboys aren't done. And neither is Wyatt. You don't sleep that night. Neither does Wyatt. The streets are too quiet now. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that makes dogs bark at nothing and windows stay shuttered even when the air's too hot. Tombstone is holding its breath. And everyone's waiting to see which corpse will be next. It's only been hours since the shootout. And already, the whispers have turned to growls. The cowboys, what's left of them, aren't licking wounds. They're sharpening blades. Frank McClory's blood is still drying in the dirt when someone tries to flip the narrative. Suddenly, the Earps aren't lawmen anymore. They're murderers, bullies, tyrants with badges and vendettas. The town splits like a log under an axe. Some folks swear Wyatt saved Tombstone. Others swear he just killed it. You trail Wyatt to the courthouse, where he stands in front of a judge for a hearing that's part legal proceeding, part public theater. It's not a trial, yet, but it's close. Witnesses are called. Tempers flare. You hear the cowboys' allies spin a story where Wyatt and his brothers weren't defending the town. They were executing unarmed men in cold blood. Historians still argue over what was actually said in those 30 seconds. Some witnesses claimed the cowboys were raising their hands to surrender. Others said they were reaching for guns. Some claimed the Earps fired first. Others swore it was Doc Holliday. And one man, Billy Claiborne, just ran away before anything started. Never to be heard from again. That's a career move. Honestly, the hearing drags for weeks. You stand in the back, watching Wyatt's face. He doesn't flinch. He doesn't sweat. He looks like a man waiting for a train, not a noose. Eventually, the judge rules in the Earps' favor. Says they acted within the scope of their duties as lawmen. No charges, no jail time. But don't mistake that for justice or safety, because outside the courtroom, Tombstone has already decided this isn't over. Ike Clanton, who fled the shootout and lived to spin his version, is still barking in the saloons. He says he was unarmed, says he was set up, says Wyatt Earp will die for what happened. And Wyatt, he's already preparing. He starts carrying a gun openly now. A new one, perhaps. The kind of firearm that says I no longer trust the law to do the job I gave my life to. And he's right to worry. On December 28, 1881, you walk with Virgil Earp through the quiet streets after dinner. He's unarmed, relaxed, finally allowing himself a moment of peace. That's when the shots ring out. Ambush, hidden in the shadows. Gunmen open fire with shotguns and pistols. You hit the ground before you even know what's happening. When the smoke clears, Virgil is still alive, but barely. His left arm is shredded. Useless. He'll never throw a punch or fire a revolver with it again. Wyatt finds him in a puddle of blood. Doesn't say much, just kneels beside him and breathes in the coppery air of inevitability. Tombstone has officially declared war. But here's where it gets strange. Wyatt doesn't immediately retaliate. Not yet. He doesn't start shooting cowboys in the street or calling for blood. No, he tries something smarter. He plays politics. He gets himself appointed as Deputy U.S. Marshal for the territory. Federal authority. The kind of badge that outranks local ones. The kind of badge that gives him jurisdiction, and just enough cover for what he's about to do. And what he's about to do, you can feel it brewing behind his eyes. But the cowboys strike again before he moves. March 18, 1882. You walk beside Morgan Earp into the back room of Campbell and Hatch's saloon. It's late. The oil lamps flicker. Someone's playing a quiet hand of billiards. Then, crack. A rifle shot punches through the window. Morgan collapses. Spine shattered. You rush to his side. He's coughing blood. Eyes wide. Trying to speak. He dies before they can even carry him home. Wyatt is already halfway out the door. That night, you sit with him as he holds vigil over Morgan's body. He says nothing, doesn't cry, doesn't rage, just stares at the door like it owes him an explanation. And you know, now he's going to answer. Not through courts, not through politics, through lead. Here's a fringe fact you can hold on to as everything starts to spiral. Wyatt had offers to leave. Friends in California, a new life waiting. Even Josie begged him to walk away before it was too late. But he didn't, because when someone kills your brother in the dark, the idea of too late ceases to exist. And when you spent your whole life enforcing rules, and those rules break your family instead of protecting them, you stop playing by them. So Wyatt gathers a posse. Not a legal one, an efficient one. Doc Holliday, Sherman McMaster, Jack Vermillion, Warren Earp. They call themselves the Vendetta Posse. They don't arrest, they don't question, they ride. And you ride with them. The rules just changed. And Wyatt Earp's not wearing a badge anymore. He's wearing a target. You wake up to the sound of saddle leather stretching and boots striking frozen earth. It's March 1882. And Wyatt Earp is no longer a lawman. He's something else now, something sharper, colder, harder to define. This isn't about due process anymore. This is a vendetta. You ride with him through the hills outside Tombstone. The air dry as gunpowder. Your breath fogging against the morning chill. Wyatt's eyes never stop moving. One hand always near the grip of his revolver, the other resting easy on the horn of his saddle, like he's trying to remember how to be human. He lost Morgan, Virgil's maimed, the law shrugged, and now, he's going to make someone pay. The posse is small but lethal. Doc Holliday rides just behind Wyatt, coughing between jokes, eyes bright with something that looks a lot like joy. Sherman McMaster, an ex-lawman turned shadow, keeps to the rear. Texas Jack, Vermillion, who allegedly killed a man for spitting too close to his boot, rides silent. Warren Earp, younger, hungry for revenge, follows without blinking. No badges, no warrants, just a list of names and a growing itch to cross 'em off. First up, Frank Stillwell. You find him skulking around the Tucson train station, a coward with a revolver and too much sweat on his brow. Wyatt believes, swears, Stillwell helped ambush Morgan and tried to finish off Virgil. Whether there's hard proof or not, doesn't matter anymore. You stand under a flickering gas lamp as Wyatt and the others chase Stillwell down the tracks like hounds on a scent. There's shouting, a flash of gunfire. You don't see who fires first, you just hear it, one after another, like firecrackers laced with fury. By the time it's over, Stillwell's body is unrecognizable, riddled, charred, left as a warning. Mainstream history footnote. The coroner's report lists multiple bullet wounds. One source claims Stillwell's body was hit by at least 6 rounds. Another says it was closer to 10. Either way, he never made it out of the rail yard. And the message? Crystal clear. You do not touch the Earps and walk away. The newspapers call it extrajudicial killing. Some call it vigilante justice. Others call it murder. Historians still argue whether Wyatt Earp crossed a moral line here, or simply stepped into the role the West had always written for him. But you're not reading about it. You're riding in it. Next up, Indian Charlie. Real name, Florentino Cruz. Allegedly part of the ambush crew that killed Morgan. You find him in the brush near Pete Spence's ranch. He runs. Doesn't make it far. Wyatt pulls the trigger himself. That's 2. No arrests. No speeches. Just a cold wind and a slightly heavier silence than before. The posse moves deeper into the desert, chasing leads and leaving behind nervous townsfolk who aren't sure whether to thank them or start boarding up their windows. The governor's fuming. He sends messages, demands justice, prosecution, restraint. Wyatt reads them, folds them, doesn't respond. He's not negotiating anymore. He's delivering. One night, you sit by the campfire with the posse. Doc Holliday is playing with his knife, carving patterns into a piece of driftwood. He looks over at Wyatt and says, "You know this ends with one of us in the ground, right?" Wyatt nods, sipping his coffee. "Just not today." Fringe tidbit. One rumor claims Wyatt wore a steel breastplate under his duster during these rides, just in case. No one's sure if it's true. But wouldn't you? The next day, the posse tracks Curly Bill Brocious near the Whetstone Mountains. This one's personal. Curly Bill is the nucleus of cowboy chaos. A man as unpredictable as he is deadly. If Stillwell was a message, this is a reckoning. The fight comes fast. Gunfire explodes across the mesquite. Curly Bill, hidden behind a waterhole, opens fire with a shotgun. Bullets tear through the air. You duck behind a rock. Feel the wind slap your face as rounds whip past. And Wyatt rides straight into the gunfire. Not around it, through it. He doesn't swerve, doesn't duck, just rides into hell, shotgun braced across his saddle horn, and unloads both barrels into Curly Bill at close range. Some say Curly was blown nearly in half. Others say he tried to crawl away before Wyatt finished the job with his revolver. Either way, when the smoke clears, Curly Bill isn't breathing, and the cowboys just lost their most dangerous wild card. Even Doc looks stunned. "Well," he mutters, "I'll be damned. You already are." That night, the desert is unnaturally quiet. Coyotes keep their distance. Even the wind seems hesitant. You sit beside Wyatt and watch the fire crackle. He hasn't said much since Curly Bill fell. But you can see it in his face. This isn't about balance anymore. This is inertia. You kill one man, and suddenly the rest fall like dominoes, until you can't remember which one started the chain. By the end of the Vendetta ride, Wyatt's body count has blurred. Some cowboys vanish, others die off-screen, in alleys or brush or mines. The posse dissolves like a fever breaking. And one morning, you wake up to find Wyatt already packing his gear. No grand farewell, no mission accomplished, just a saddlebag, a stiff back, and the faint echo of gunshots behind him. He leaves Arizona a wanted man in some corners, a hero in others. And you're not sure which is worse. Because one thing's certain now, there's no going back. Not for Wyatt, not for you, not for the West. You've left the desert behind now. But the dust still clings to your boots, and your conscience. Wyatt Earp is no longer riding a vendetta trail. He's slipping quietly out of Arizona, a fading shadow with too many ghosts riding shotgun in his head. The headlines haven't caught up yet, but the law has. Tombstone is buzzing with accusations. Wyatt's name is printed in black ink, slanted either as a hero or a rogue. The cowboys, what's left of them, are screaming for justice. They demand trials, arrests, retribution. Wyatt, he's already 3 towns gone. But the story isn't over. Not yet. Because now you enter the strange limbo between legend and law. And this is where the line blurs even further. You ride with Wyatt to Colorado first. Then New Mexico. Dodge City gets a brief cameo. Every time he shows his face, someone wants to ask about the OK Corral. Others want revenge. And more than a few just want to shake his hand. But Wyatt doesn't smile much these days. He's distant, alert, like he's waiting for someone to step out of the shadows and end this whole myth with one well-placed bullet. You watch him sit in corner booths, back to the wall, always scanning, always silent. He knows the Vendetta ride wasn't an ending, it was an ignition. And sure enough, in early 1883, the state of Arizona issues warrants. Officially, Wyatt's a fugitive, not just the hero who cleaned up Tombstone, but a man on the run from the very law he once upheld. Historians still argue whether Wyatt feared prosecution or simply knew better than to trust a courtroom bought and paid for by men in red sashes. Some say he was guilty of murder. Others argue the territory had failed to deliver justice. So Wyatt simply collected the debt himself. And you just know he isn't looking back. Here's a quirky detail. At one point, Wyatt and Josie Marcus, yes, she's still with him, end up in Eagle County, Colorado, working mining claims again. Silver, always silver, the irony burns. He's trying to build a future using the very metal that helped fracture Tombstone. But Wyatt's never really a miner. Not in heart. He drifts into saloons again. Gambling, poker. He starts looking more like a man trying to stay one step ahead of his own reputation. You hear a rumor one night. A cowboy survivor spotted Wyatt in Trinidad. Another says he passed through Silverton. Someone swears they saw him in Denver, wearing a derby and talking to Pinkertons. You start to realize Wyatt Earp has become a ghost, part man, part myth, drifting across the West like smoke from a campfire no one remembers lighting. He picks up odd work here and there. Security for stage lines, private detective gigs. He even briefly joins a troupe of lawmen celebrities for public appearances. But he never stays long, because every town reminds him of one he left behind in blood and dust. And the vendetta, it may be over, technically, but you can tell, it never really ended. You see it in his eyes when someone mentions the McCloris, or Billy Clanton, or Morgan. He doesn't regret it, but he carries it. And then, something odd happens. He returns, sort of, to law enforcement. Yes, really. In 1884, in the mining town of Eagle City, Idaho Territory, Wyatt takes on a role as deputy sheriff. just for a while, just enough to handle the local outlaws who are pushing their luck. You see him settle a few disputes, break up a brawl, fire a warning shot into the air that gets everyone's attention. For a flicker of a second, he looks like the old Wyatt again. But it doesn't last, because by now, the world is changing. Railroads stretch farther, telephones are being tested, automobiles are just around the corner. And the Wild West, it's already turning into something nostalgic. A place you remember, not live. Wyatt doesn't fit in here. He's not modern, he's not quaint, he's the gap in between. You walk with him through San Diego next, where he tries property development. It almost works. He buys and sells lots. Even opens a saloon. He gambles every night and rides horses through quiet coastal streets in the morning. But there's no thunder left in it. Josie's still by his side. She's sharp-tongued, fiercely loyal, and doesn't let him get lost in his own silence. When someone asks her once if Wyatt ever smiles, she says, "Only when he wins at poker. And only if I'm not watching." And you're starting to wonder if maybe the fight never really defined him. Maybe it just revealed him. Another fringe story makes its way to you. Wyatt was invited to referee a prize fight between Bob Fitzsimmons and Tom Sharkey in 1896. Supposedly, he was chosen for his reputation, incorruptible, fearless, neutral, but when the fight ends with Wyatt declaring Sharkey the winner after Fitzsimmons had clearly landed the knockout punch, the crowd explodes. Scandal follows. Rumors fly. Did Wyatt take a bribe? He says no, swears it was a foul. But people don't forget, the man who once enforced justice in Tombstone is now accused of fixing a boxing match in San Francisco. It's not murder, but it feels worse. And yet, Wyatt just shrugs. That's always been his secret, hasn't it? Not the speed of his draw, but the way he never gives away what he's thinking. He fades again, into the desert, into saloons, into rumors. People ask if he's still alive. He is, but only just, because the world is moving on. And Wyatt Earp, he's not sure where he fits anymore. You find him again in the shimmering heat of Nevada, of all places. The years rolled past the 1890s now, and Wyatt Earp is older, leaner, a little slower, but still unmistakable. He's traded his broad-rimmed hat for something stiffer, more modern. His coat hangs looser. The dust on his boots is now silver mine dust, not Tombstone's bloodied grit. He's not chasing outlaws anymore. Not officially. Now he's chasing investments. You walk beside him through the boomtowns of the Nevada desert, Tonopah, Goldfield, places that sprouted up overnight like ghost stories looking for a body. And as always, Wyatt arrives just before the real trouble starts. He's got a knack for timing, doesn't he? You watch him stake claims, haggle over property, and talk mining rights with men half his age. Some of them recognize him. "Aren't you that lawman from Arizona?" they whisper. Others just know him as Mr. Earp, a poker player with a stiff back and eyes that scan like a bank vault. But Wyatt doesn't boast, doesn't advertise. He's done being a legend. Now he's trying to be something else, something survivable. Still, the world doesn't let go of people like Wyatt. Even when he tries to live quiet, the noise finds him. Take the Goldfield Saloon, for example. It's 1904, the town's booming, and Wyatt's running a gambling concession there. It's hot, loud, and full of prospectors with too much money and no manners. One night, a drunk pulls a pistol over a crooked bet. Wyatt, now in his mid-50s, disarms the man without firing a shot. Word spreads. He's still got it, they say. Maybe he does, but you see the twitch in his hand afterward. The extra pause before he sits back down. He's not invincible anymore, just practiced. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Wyatt did indeed serve briefly as a lawman in several towns after the OK Corral, including Tonopah, but his role wasn't always official. Often, he was simply a man with a reputation who knew when to step in, and who no one wanted to challenge. And yet, the ghosts still find him. You ride with him one day past a mine entrance when someone mentions Tombstone. just casually. A joke. You ever really shoot that many men? Wyatt doesn't laugh. He doesn't answer, either. He just keeps walking, boots crunching the gravel, eyes focused on something you can't see. Because that's the truth. Wyatt carries Tombstone like a scar under his shirt. You can't see it anymore, but it's always there. Itchy, tender, dangerous if scratched. Fringe tidbit time. There's a persistent rumor that Wyatt kept one of Doc Holliday's pistols after Doc died in 1887. A gift, a memory, maybe even a promise. No one knows where the gun ended up. But the idea that Wyatt kept something of Doc's, something weighty, personal, that part feels true. He still talks about Doc sometimes. Late at night, usually after his third cup of coffee. Meanest friend I ever had. He mutters once. But he never ran, not once. That's the closest you'll get to sentiment from Wyatt Earp. The years wear on. He makes and loses money in equal measure. Josie is still beside him, sharp-eyed, sarcastic, and the only person who can call him out without risking a stare down. They fight sometimes, they move often, but they never separate. You get the sense they understand each other better than most married couples ever will. Now here's a twist. In 1897, Wyatt heads to Alaska. Yes, Alaska. Skagway, to be exact. Gold Rush territory. He opens a saloon there. Naturally, they call it the Dexter. It's loud, dirty, profitable. You see him stand at the bar, older than every other man in the room, and still commanding more space than any of them. He and Josie stay through the winter. Wyatt endures the cold with a scarf wrapped twice around his neck and a revolver tucked beneath his coat, because some things never change. But eventually, the pull of the South returns, and they drift back down to California. He's slowing now, less riding, more pacing, less gunfire, more memories. You catch him one night on the beach in San Pedro, just staring at the waves. He doesn't say anything for a long while. Then, you think we were right? You know what he means. He's not asking about law or revenge. He's asking about the life, the choices, the way the bullets always seemed to follow him, even when his hands were clean. Historians still debate whether Wyatt Earp was a hero, a criminal, or just a survivor. Some say he brought justice. Others say he delivered vendettas wrapped in tin stars. But out here, with salt wind in your nose and sand in your boots, all you see is a man who did what he had to do, and then kept walking. Because the West doesn't give you closure. It gives you miles. And Wyatt Earp, he walked every single one of them. You're in Los Angeles now. Early 1900s. The saloons are sleeker, the horses are fewer, and the men wear suits instead of dusters. You could almost believe the Old West never happened. Except Wyatt Earp is still here. He blends in like a steel trap under silk sheets. The beard's gone, the hair's gray, but the eyes are unchanged, flint and shadow. He walks slowly now, but every step still lands with weight. You trail behind him down Spring Street, past new electric streetcars and brick buildings that would have looked absurd back in Dodge. The Wild West is gone. Wyatt didn't die with it, but part of him did. He lives with Josie now in a small bungalow, renting more often than owning. Money comes and goes, mining claims, real estate schemes, gambling debts. They squabble about cash almost constantly. Josie wants comfort. Wyatt still gambles like the next hand will finally set them straight. But here's the twist. He's famous. Sort of. Whispers follow him. That's Wyatt Earp. They say at card tables, in hotels, on street corners. But the legends are scattered, inconsistent. Some folks think he was the hero of the OK Corral. Others swear he murdered unarmed men in cold blood. Some say he was best friends with Buffalo Bill. Others think he was Buffalo Bill. Historians still argue how much of Wyatt's legend was true and how much was pure pulp. The reality, Wyatt was somewhere in between, an iron spine wrapped in contradictions. And then Hollywood calls. That's not a metaphor. In 1915, the film industry is booming in LA, and Wyatt, of all people, starts hanging around studio sets. He befriends a few up-and-comers, John Ford, William S. Hart, even a young extra named Marion Morrison. You'll know him later as John Wayne. You follow Wyatt onto dusty backlots where cowboys shoot blank rounds and fall off painted horses in choreographed agony. It's surreal. He watches these men pretend to be him. Grizzled marshals keeping order with perfect hair and flawless timing. And for once, he smiles. One fringe tidbit you overhear on set. Wyatt supposedly gives advice to silent film star Tom Mix about how to properly draw a six-shooter. The man listens, but does it his own way. Wyatt just shakes his head and mutters, "Too pretty to ever survive Dodge." The irony is rich, because for all the cowboy roles, none of these actors have ever seen what you have: men bleeding in dusty alleys. A judge deciding a man's fate based on who bought him lunch. A funeral for a brother who never saw the knife coming. And Wyatt, he's not bitter, he's amused, quietly proud. They turned him into a movie before he even died. But the thing is, no studio wants his real story. Not as is. Too murky, too gray. They want white hat heroes and black hat villains. And Wyatt Earp, he wore both hats depending on the week. Still, you catch him holding court at a nearby cafe, retelling tales to anyone who'll listen. Doc Holliday gets extra flair. Curly Bill becomes more monstrous. Morgan's death gets quieter, heavier. Each story told is part confession, part performance. He's rewriting himself, gently, stubbornly, into something the world can live with. Not a killer, not a saint, just a man who survived. But the world keeps shifting. Fast, radios buzz. Telephones ring, cars honk past saloons turned into pharmacies. Wyatt crosses intersections like a ghost with a time machine, increasingly out of step. And yet, he still draws attention. Newspapers print mini-profiles. Wyatt Earp, lawman of the West, now lives quietly in LA. He gets letters, people wanting autographs, wanting to touch a piece of the myth. He rarely answers. Josie sometimes does, using flowery penmanship and phrases like, "Wyatt is keeping well," though he misses the wide-open land. Mainstream fact: in 1925, a writer named Walter Noble burns Penn's tombstone, an Iliad of the Southwest, which romanticizes Wyatt's story into near myth. The public devours it. Wyatt reads parts aloud, bemused. Half this book, he grumbles, is horse manure, but he doesn't stop them. Because myth, it turns out, pays better than truth. And you know Wyatt, he's never been above collecting on what the world owes him. He tries, again, to get a full memoir written. Enlists a writer named John Flood. But the prose comes out stiff, sanctimonious, like someone trying too hard to clean the blood off a story that needs it. Publishers pass. Even in death, it seems, Wyatt won't get the version he wants. You follow him home one evening as the sun dips low over the Pacific. He moves slower now, breath shorter. Josie nags him about dinner. He waves her off with a wink, sits down in his warm chair, and stares out the window as the light fades. No pistols on the wall, no badges, just silence. And you finally realize something. This wasn't a story about law. It wasn't even a story about revenge. It was a story about control, how one man tried to shape a world of chaos with a firm voice and a loaded gun. And how even that world moved on without asking his permission. But he left something behind. A name, a myth, and maybe, just maybe, a reason to remember. You sit with him now in the soft hush of the 1920s. Where everything feels quieter, even the anger. Los Angeles glows with early neon and a touch of the surreal, like a dream just beginning to forget itself. But Wyatt Earp is still awake inside it, still pacing the edges of his own legend. His house is modest, just 4 rooms and a little garden Josie fusses over more than he ever does. The city has grown around him. Freeways hum in the distance. Movie stars dine a few blocks away. No one rides into town anymore. They glide in. And yet, every so often, someone knocks on the door. Sometimes it's a young writer. sometimes an actor, sometimes just a wide-eyed fan in a straw hat clutching a first edition of Tombstone. They want the same thing: to hear the stories from the man himself. And Wyatt, well, some days he indulges. He'll lean back in his chair, stare into the air like it's a dusty saloon, and start with something like, "Doc always said never play poker with a man named two-time." It never matters whether the tale's true. The pause between sentences is real. The weight in his voice. The names he never forgets. You hear them all again: Virgil, Morgan, Doc, Bat, Josie, even Curly Bill. Each one a scar, a memory, a piece of him spread across hundreds of miles and decades of dirt roads. But here's where it gets strange. Hollywood still won't make his story. Not really. You walk with him onto a set one day in 1928. It's a western, naturally painted backdrops, actors in spotless dusters, a grizzled director barking orders. One of the stars recognizes Wyatt, rushes over, practically bowing. "Mr. Earp, sir, you're Wyatt Earp." Wyatt just nods, doesn't smile. The actor gestures to the set. "What do you think?" Wyatt looks around at the pristine horses, the sparkling revolvers, the clean-shaven outlaws. Then he says, "Too clean, no one ever bled this neat," and walks away. That's the thing about the stories, they're always missing something. Always too shiny, too choreographed, too safe. Historians still debate whether Wyatt ever truly wanted the real story told. Maybe that's why he never found the right writer. Or maybe he knew that the real version, the version with the mistakes, the grief, the cold decisions, would never be the one people wanted. They didn't want the man. They wanted the myth. But here's your quirky twist for tonight. For a short time in his final years, Wyatt takes comfort in the strangest of friendships, with silent film star William S. Hart. The two sit and drink coffee together in Hart's home, swapping stories. Wyatt gives advice on how to walk, how to ride, how to aim a pistol and mean it. It's the closest Hollywood ever comes to capturing the actual Wild West. Hart promises he'll make a film one day. A true one. Wyatt just nods. He's heard it all before. As the years wear on, you watch his world shrink. Fewer walks, fewer visitors. Josie still talks to reporters when they call. Still guards his legacy like a mother wolf. She doesn't allow anyone to say gunfight, only encounter. Doesn't like the word vendetta either. She insists it was all legal, all justified. She's rewriting him. Even now, Wyatt doesn't fight her. Why would he? He spent a lifetime making choices no one could understand. Let them guess. Let them soften the edges. Let them decide which version they like best. You catch him rereading letters sometimes. Old ones. Folded so many times they've started to tear at the creases. Some from old friends. Some from old enemies. He doesn't say which is which. "I outlived them all," he mumbles one day. "Even the ones who were smarter." And then, a moment later, almost too quiet to catch. That might not be a good thing. He's not bitter, just tired. You sit with him late into the evening one night. The sky dim and soft outside the window. A car rumbles by. A dog barks 2 streets over. Wyatt Earp leans back in his chair, closes his eyes, and starts listing names under his breath. Not towns, not saloons. People. Morgan, Virgil, Doc, Fred White, Johnny Bean, Ike, Stillwell, Curly Bill. Like a rosary of the dead. The world he knew is gone. The one he helped shape doesn't remember him the right way. And the one you live in now, it's built on versions of him that never bled. But that's fine. Wyatt doesn't need the world to remember correctly. He just needs it to remember something. He was here. He mattered. And when the worst of men came knocking, he opened the door. You wake to rain tapping the roof, soft, steady, as if the sky itself is finally ready to slow down. Inside the Earp house, everything is still. Wyatt doesn't stir as quickly anymore. His bones ache, his breath rattles, and that iron posture has given way to a slight, inevitable hunch. But his eyes, they're still watching. He sees you, sees everything, the way old men do. having outlived not only their enemies but their own usefulness. And in that quiet, as the world spins faster around him, he starts doing something unexpected. He starts talking, not just to you, not just to Josie, but to anyone willing to listen. And this time, not in one-liners or dry quips. He tells the whole story. Or, at least, his version of it. And when he does, you start to realize, the war for Wyatt Earp's legacy hasn't ended. It's just beginning. He starts with the basics: his family, his first badge in Wichita, his stints in Dodge and Tombstone. You've heard it before, but this time, the way he says it, it's less defensive, less performative, just steady recollection, like he knows this might be his final chance to shape the myth before someone else does. And boy, are they already trying. Writers are circling, reporters, biographers. You see their names in return addresses. Some respectful, some hungry. They want to turn Wyatt into an icon, or a warning. Depends who's paying. There's the famous Stuart Lake, of course. A journalist with a flair for the dramatic. He writes to Wyatt, offering to write the definitive biography. Wyatt, surprisingly, agrees. Maybe he's tired, maybe he's ready, maybe he just wants someone else to carry the weight for a while. But Wyatt dies before the book is finished. So Lake finishes it for him. And that's where it gets tricky. Because Wyatt Earp, Frontier Marshal, published in 1931, becomes a sensation. It sells well, people love it. It paints Wyatt as a heroic, unflinching lawman, clean-shaven, moral, almost saint-like. It turns the OK Corral into a clear-cut showdown between good and evil. And it's mostly fiction. Lake admits later he enhanced the truth, filled in gaps, changed names, added dialogue, took creative liberties. Historians still argue whether Lake was doing Wyatt a favor or burying the truth under Hollywood glitter. Some say Lake's myth-making saved Wyatt from obscurity. Others say it poisoned the well forever, making it impossible to separate fact from fantasy. And you just sit there, watching the world pick at a man who once held life and death in his hand like a pair of loaded dice. Josie is furious, absolutely furious. She goes to war with Lake, with publishers, with studios. She files lawsuits, writes letters, demands corrections. She claims Lake made her husband look like a cartoon. The irony, Josie's spent decades softening his legacy herself. Now she's mad someone else got to do it better. Meanwhile, more books pop up, more films, each version of Wyatt a little different. Some show him as a righteous defender of order. Others cast him as a cold-blooded killer with a badge and no soul. There's even one book that accuses him of running from every town he ever policed. The truth lies somewhere in the middle. You knew that already. But the public, they don't want the middle. They want a legend. Here's your fringe fact. In the 1940s, Hollywood finally adapts Lake's book. The movie is called My Darling Clementine. Directed by John Ford, Henry Fonda plays Wyatt, tall, noble, perfect. It's all dust and nobility and long glances across cactus plains. The gunfight at the OK Corral is 10 minutes of choreographed heroism. Not one detail matches reality, but audiences love it. And that's the moment Wyatt stops being a man, and becomes a genre. He becomes a blueprint, the stoic lawman, the man who speaks softly and carries a cult peacemaker, the one who never flinches, doesn't blink, always wins. You walk into theaters and see bits of him reflected in characters who never knew what Tombstone smelled like at dawn. And you wonder, would Wyatt have liked this? Maybe, probably, because when you spend your life enforcing your own idea of justice, it makes a kind of sense to outlive your mistakes by becoming someone who never made any. But back in real life, historians are still tearing through trial transcripts, letters, and news clippings. They compare eyewitness accounts. They chase rumors about Wyatt's missing years, his business scams, his failed friendships. They try to find the real man behind the smoke. And what they find is complicated. You learn Wyatt Earp was a gambler, a pimp, for a short time, probably a conman, a devoted brother, A reliable friend. A fair shot. A man with a badge who sometimes broke the law. A man who never claimed to be a hero, but never corrected anyone who called him one. And the debate, still going. You sit in college lecture halls and hear professors argue over whether Wyatt deserved to be remembered at all. You hear filmmakers admit their Earp is pure fiction. You watch documentaries that say, this is the true story, only to be debunked 5 years later. The truth, no one will ever get it exactly right. And maybe that's the final justice Wyatt Earp gets. He belonged to a time that no longer exists, and took most of its secrets with him. You're standing in the long shadow of a man who refused to fade, and now you realize he never really will. Wyatt Earp is gone, buried in a modest grave in Colma, California. The date on the stone says 1929. No fanfare, no state funeral, just a quiet ceremony, a few mourners, and Josie, dressed in black and fury, standing stiff as a headstone herself. The man who outlived the Wild West dies without a single lawman's salute. And yet, he becomes bigger than ever. You see it almost immediately. His obituary runs in the Los Angeles Times. But it's short, polite, safe. It doesn't capture him, and Josie knows it. She demands retractions from anyone who dares call him a killer. She rewrites passages in her own hand. He was the last honest man, she says, the last one with the nerve to stand his ground. But history doesn't settle, it argues. And in the years that follow, Wyatt's name is dragged through courts of opinion, campfire myths, and movie scripts. You sit through another Hollywood version of his life in 1957. Gunfight at the OK Corral. Burt Lancaster as Wyatt. All square jaws and spotless morality. It's compelling, but you feel something missing. The dust, the doubt, the gray that you've walked through, side by side with the man. And still the story keeps morphing. Some historians rise to defend him. They say Wyatt was a stabilizing force in a violent time. That he tried to hold the line when no one else would. That he protected his family, upheld the law, and maintained discipline in cities where mayors hid under their desks. Others aren't so generous. They cite the horse theft charge in his youth, the Peoria brothel scandal, the gambling, the vendetta ride. They say he enforced justice when it suited him and ignored it when it didn't. That he killed unarmed men. That he never actually said he was a hero, he just let other people do it for him. Historians still argue over the number of men Wyatt killed. Some say 6, some say more than 30. Others insist he barely pulled the trigger at all. For a man so famous for gunfights, there are surprisingly few confirmed kills under his belt. But maybe that's the point. Maybe Wyatt's power wasn't in how fast he drew, but in the fact that people believed he might draw first. That he could, if needed. That's a different kind of authority. You hear that echoed in interviews with men who knew him. One gambler said, he didn't say much, but when he looked at you, you behaved. And Josie, she spends the next 15 years defending his memory like a general defends a fortress. She refuses to let anyone publish a book without consulting her. She haunts newspapers, writes angry letters, and sues authors who step out of line. She also rewrites a few things herself. She claims she and Wyatt were legally married, when they weren't. She downplays his relationship with Mattie Blaylock, the common law wife he left behind in Tombstone. She burns letters, hides documents, curates the myth. You walk through her home one day after her death. Her walls are filled with photos of Wyatt, young, grim-faced, silver-tied, but there are no photos of Tombstone. No blood, no dust, just idealized fragments, as if she's trying to freeze him in the one moment where everything still made sense. But memory doesn't work that way. It melts, it blends, and Wyatt's legacy becomes something like wet paint on desert stone, smudged by time. Beautiful from a distance, and impossible to fully clean up. Fringe fact, there are still rumors today that Wyatt's ashes were secretly moved. That Josie had them relocated, that they aren't even buried beneath that humble granite marker. There's no proof, no paperwork, but in true Earp fashion, the mystery remains. And still the name lives on. You see it carved into the walls of theme parks, stitched onto cowboy boots, mentioned in rap lyrics, painted across murals. Wyatt Earp isn't just a man anymore. He's a mirror, lawman or outlaw, hero or anti-hero, protector or punisher. Each generation picks the version they want, and discards the rest. In the 1990s, the pendulum swings again. Two major films hit theaters: Tombstone, with Kurt Russell, and Wyatt Earp, with Kevin Costner. Two wildly different interpretations. One portrays Wyatt as stoic but vulnerable, the other as righteous and self-destructive. You watch both. You know both are wrong. But both are right in their own way. Because Wyatt didn't just survive the Wild West, he outlived it. And in doing so, he became its symbol, its contradiction, its final breath. You stand by his grave again. Decades later, the stone hasn't changed. The world around it has. The California soil is quiet. And for a moment, you can almost hear the clink of a spur, the rattle of a poker chip, the soft clearing of a throat before a man draws his pistol. You remember what Wyatt once said, late in life, to a curious fan: "Fast is fine, but accuracy is final." He wasn't just talking about bullets. He was talking about stories. And how they survive. The trail ends in sunlight. You're standing in Colma, California. Again, same spot, same name carved into stone. Wyatt Berry Stapp Earp. There's no music, no echo of gunfire, just the rustle of eucalyptus trees and the faint sound of a city that no longer needs lawmen like him. But you do, because what you followed wasn't just a life. It was a frontier, a moving line between chaos and order, myth and memory. And now, that line fades into pavement and palm trees. Wyatt died in 1929. Quietly, in his bed. No shootout, no final showdown. Josie at his side. His last words, if anyone really knows them, are lost. The newspapers called him a man of the West. But none quite knew what that meant. Not really. You watch as time does what bullets never could. It softens him. Sandpapers down the sharp edges. The gray decisions. The blood on his boots. Now he's a monument. A movie. A name that sounds like thunder when whispered in the right tone. But you remember the rest. The doubt in Dodge. The dust in Tombstone. The silence after Morgan fell. The look on Wyatt's face when law failed, and he decided to become something else. And you remember the ride. That long, relentless ride for justice, or revenge, or something between. Historians still argue if it was ever justified, if he could have done it differently, if any of it mattered. You know better, because you've been here, in the saddle, in the silence, and now you understand. Wyatt Earp wasn't a symbol of virtue. He was a symbol of control. In a time and place where chaos reigned, he chose not to blink, chose to step forward when others stepped back. And while the methods were flawed, and the outcomes messy, he did something that echoes even now. He acted, not because he wanted to be famous, but because someone had to stand there when the dust blew in and the bullets started flying. He wasn't the fastest, or the smartest, or the kindest, but he was there. That's what stuck. Fringe detail for the road. Wyatt Earp is buried next to Josie, under a Jewish star. She was Jewish, after all. He wasn't, but in the end, the line between them blurred, just like everything else. And now the West is gone. Its train stations are museums. Its saloons are taco joints. Its marshals have been replaced by algorithms and sirens. But Wyatt, he's still here, in the gravel behind every great story, in the squint of every reluctant hero, in every moment where a man, flawed, tired, outnumbered, decides to stand his ground anyway. So go ahead, tip your hat. The ride's over, but the legend, that's still out there, somewhere in the dust. And now, we rest. The storm has passed, the boots are quiet, and Wyatt Earp rides no longer. You've made it through the dust, the gunfire, the half-truths, and the heavy silences, and now you sit in the soft stillness of the end, where time stretches just a little longer, like the last light of sunset refusing to let go. You can almost hear the creak of a saddle as it's lifted one last time. Smell the faint echo of whiskey on aged oak. Feel the phantom pulse of hoofbeats under a desert moon. It's not real, not anymore. But it lingers, doesn't it? That's how myths work. They fade gently, not suddenly. They hum long after the song has stopped. And in your quiet room tonight, with the light low and the story complete, you carry a piece of that myth with you. Not the violence, not the glory, just the weight of it, the truth in it. You've walked through the Old West, not the one made of popcorn movies and drawling actors, but the one where choices were muddy, and heroes were haunted, and survival didn't come with applause. And that's what makes this story so soft, so strange, so lasting. You don't need to remember every detail. Just remember the feel of it. The dry wind, the steady hand, the man who stood where others wouldn't. Now let it drift, sink back, close your eyes, and let the ghost of Wyatt Earp ride off, one last time, into that endless golden haze, where no one waits with a badge, and no one's left to judge.